So, have you ever actually stopped to wonder how people find out who they were in a past life? I mean, how does that information actually get in? Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a massive study of over 3,300 reincarnation cases to uncover exactly how past life memories surface in the first place. Whether you're already super familiar with life continuity studies or you're just kind of curious about how this data gets collected, we are going to break down the exact pathways, we can call them doorways, that these memories use to enter our conscious minds. Okay, let's just get right into this. Before any intense historical matching, genealogical deep dives, or facial analysis happens, there is always a single, raw moment of discovery. It might be a toddler casually mentioning a different family while eating a bowl of cereal, or an adult getting hit by this profound sense of déjà vu in a foreign city. The researchers in this study literally call that initial moment the doorway. Because think about it, without that door opening, none of the subsequent research can even begin. Now, to really grasp this research, we have to strictly separate two distinct concepts. We're talking about discovery versus verification. Discovery is simply how the identity first surfaces, right? It's the raw, completely unprompted entry point. Verification, on the flip side, is all about the tools investigators use much later to corroborate that identity. Keeping these two things totally distinct is absolutely crucial if we're going to make sense of the thousands of cases sitting across these databases. All right, moving to Section 1, a tale of three archives. It turns out the researchers didn't just look in one single place. They analyzed three completely different worlds of data. So you've got Database 1, which is a highly curated library of 321 verified cases used by the investigators. Then you have Database 2, this massive public forum holding over 3,000 raw, lived experience accounts from everyday people. And finally, Database 3 is a canon of 50 heavily researched, narrated case studies. The brilliant takeaway here? The doorway you see depends entirely on which room you're standing in. How an investigator views a case is fundamentally different from how an ordinary person actually lives it. Let's move on to Section 2, experiencing the past inside. Let's zoom in on that second database, the public forum. This is where we find over 3,000 raw first-person accounts of discovery, documented before any professional investigators or researchers ever touched them. And the numbers tell an incredible story. Discovery is overwhelmingly experiential. People literally live the memory from the inside out. The most common doorway, at 722 cases, is just a child spontaneously talking about a past life. But we also see massive numbers for childhood dreams, past life regressions, and totally unprompted adult memories. Out in the real world, a past life is far more often felt or dreamt than it is looked up in a history book. But here's a specific finding that completely shatters an old myth. For decades, the assumption was always that reincarnation memory was strictly a children's phenomenon, right? Well, the data shows 629 cases of spontaneous adult memory. Adult memories, like surfacing as a wave of recognition at a historical site, or suddenly knowing a name that carries this impossible familiarity, they're nearly as common as childhood statements. You don't just outgrow the doorway. But what if there is no explicit memory to begin with? What if a child isn't giving you names or towns, or an adult isn't having these incredibly vivid dreams? Sometimes the doorway isn't a literal memory image at all, but rather a profound, undeniable signal pointing backward. Often, the very first clue is a physical or emotional signal. The data actually reveals 273 cases starting with an unexplained behavioral trait or severe phobia. Think of a child who is absolutely terrified of water due to a past life drowning, and this happens long before they can even articulate it. We also see 173 cases of geographic pull, which is basically this sudden, unexplained magnetism to a foreign country you've never even visited. Plus, 169 cases begin with sheer inner intuition, just a deep soul knowing of who you were without any specific memory image triggering it at all. Which brings us to Section 3, verification after the door opens. So once that initial experiential doorway swings open, whether that's through a dream, a crazy phobia, or a child's spontaneous statement, how do investigators actually go about verifying the details? This takes us right from discovery over to verification, and there's a huge contrast in the data. For everyday folks in the public forum, they almost never discover their past lives through a medium. But in the curated archive, investigators heavily rely on spirit channeling and historical portraits. Why? Because these aren't the original doorways. They are highly specialized tools that investigators reach for to affirm and verify an identity long after the raw memory has already surfaced. And this brings up a really fascinating methodological concept used by the Institute for Life Continuity Studies, the harmonic. When investigators consult channeled information from a spirit being, they actually do not log it as absolute proof. Instead, they log it as a harmonic. You can think of it like tuning into a different frequency on the exact same radio dial. It's used strictly to check for historical synchronicities, not as definitive evidence. This lets investigators maintain a stance of confident humility, using channeling to guide their research rather than letting it dictate the whole case. So here is the absolute key takeaway. Experiential doorways, those spontaneous memories, dreams, and sudden intuitions, that is where cases are born. Mediated channels, like psychics, spirit channeling, or comparing historical portraits, are where cases get refined. Confusing those two things is honestly the biggest mistake people make when they try to read through a reincarnation archive. All right, Section 4, the evidence gold standard. Which logically leads us to the ultimate question for any investigator or researcher out there. How do we know if any of these cases carry genuine evidentiary weight? How do we separate a really interesting fantasy from a truly compelling, solid case? Well, the answer lies in what researchers call before-case documentation. This is the gold standard of the field. It basically means a parent or the subject wrote down all the specific names, places, and events of the memory before anyone touched a history book or typed a name into a search engine. It is the most valuable evidence possible because it completely eliminates the risk that the subject was accidentally exposed to historical facts before they supposedly remembered them. Now, I was absolutely blown away by this statistic. Out of 321 verified cases in the curated database, only 3, literally just 3, possess this flawless gold standard documentation. I mean, wow, that proves just how incredibly rare and vital it is to capture the raw memory instantly. The reality is, most cases are documented retroactively, right after the historical match has already been found, and that instantly lowers the evidential weight of the whole case. To ensure a case is actually suggestive of reincarnation rather than just some sort of cultural contamination or pure chance, investigators follow a really strict, repeatable path. Step 1, identify the doorway. Step 2 is absolutely critical. Protect the raw memory immediately through a blind intake. This means you lock down the statements before doing literally any research. Then, they systematically screen out alternative explanations, profile the subject's personality, and only then do they even begin searching history for those synchronicities. And it's only in the absolute final stages of this method that investigators finally bring in those verification tools we talked about earlier. They'll use facial portraiture as a tiebreaker between historical candidates, but never as the headline. They apply 10 principles, like birthmarks and innate talents, as a refining lens. They'll log any harmonic channeled input, and finally, they objectively score the evidence. Because remember, evidence lives on a spectrum. It's not just a simple pass-fail test. And this brilliantly highlights exactly why this matters for you today. As the data clearly shows, discovery and documentation have to be the exact same decision, made at the exact same moment. If a memory ever surfaces for you or your kid, writing it down immediately with date stamps is literally the only way to protect its integrity. That one simple act is what turns a fascinating personal experience into a highly valuable evidential case. We've seen that these memories, they don't just appear out of nowhere. They enter through very specific, recognizable doorways, whether that's a child's totally innocent statement, a wild, unexplainable phobia, or a sudden adult intuition that hits you out of the blue. Which leaves us with one final thought to consider. If your past surfaced tomorrow in a recurring dream or a sudden feeling of déjà vu, would you recognize the doorway? Thanks for exploring this explainer with me today. Keep asking questions and definitely keep your eyes open for those doorways.